Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everybody.
There are 6 callers on the call.
Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here. There are 9 or 10 of us here. 5 more phone calls out there besides us. So we've been working with or playing with here and now, as opposed to space and time. I would love to hear anybody that has had any experiences with that would like to share them, or anyone who has any questions about that they'd like to ask, or anybody that has anything they want to say about anything.
Adele, I just wanted to
This is Jim.
Oh, it's okay, Jim.
Hello? Hi, who's that?
This is Jim.
Hi, Jim.
I just thought of another metaphor for the freeway that we talked about last week, and that is, I'm reminded of a riddle. If the wheel of a car is turning at a speed that allows the car to go 60 miles an hour, how fast is the bottom of the tire moving? And the answer is, not at all. It's always the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought I'd throw that out.
Good, thank you. Anybody else playing with here and now? Any difficulties? Did you want to say something, Adele?
Oh, I just wanted to thank everyone. It was really helpful last week. It's been really helpful. And I realized with regards to the healing stuff, I don't know what's going to happen later, it doesn't matter. But that I just didn't want to I didn't want to go through more medical tests. And that I was having a really tough time admitting that I didn't want to. And then, and asking for help, I didn't realize that I couldn't do that alone either. And it was just a really big, it was really helpful last week. And I don't recall having been that pissed off for years and years. I remember getting that angry, feeling that angry years ago in this room during a class. And I was angry that I didn't want to stand on what I knew to be okay for me without anyone else saying it's okay. And I was really kind of shocked by how hard that was to admit. And I wanted to thank all of you. You've been so helpful and just unbelievable.
Yeah, thank you. This has come up a couple of times this week. There's no trophies for not going to a doctor. People ask me, well, when should I go to a doctor and when should I stand? And my answer typically is, if you know within yourself that it's time to take a stand, that you've had enough of this nonsense, then perhaps it's time to take a stand. But if you are experiencing a physical problem, then the work has already not been sufficient, and it's probably time to go get the physical problem resolved and then get back to work. And Joel says that. He just says point blank that, if you've got a physical problem, go get it taken care of, and so that the pain no longer disturbs you, or the symptoms, whatever they are, no longer disturb you, and then get back to work. Because the infinite way practice and this healing work and all of this consciousness work is preventative work. It's not designed so much for healing work, especially, our personal healing work. Personally, it's fine for us to use it to lift each other. But as far as ourselves, it's preventative work. And Joel and Herb also both say that, even if you're a very high student and a very high practitioner, then you can expect to only experience, you can expect to not experience 80 or 90% of what normal people experience who are out there in the world going through the usual things of colds and flus and stuff. They don't say that you're going to be 100% free. They say, that we can expect to only experience 10 or 20% of what they usually experience, and when we do get something, it will be typically, less severe and last not last as long and stuff like that. But there's nothing wrong with it. Get it fixed and get back to work. There's no trophies, and it doesn't make you a saint if you can not go see a doctor. And there's no. Not a yardstick. There's nothing to be gained by doing that. So be who you are and operate from where you're operating from. And if you have a problem, deal with it and continue the work. Does that bring up anything for anybody?
Sure. This is Chris.
Yeah, Chris.
The
This
biggest
is
challenge.
Jim again.
Hold on, Jim. Chris is sharing.
My problem starts soul. And I do see a psychiatrist, and I do take antidepressants. I don't believe at this point in my life that I can stay sober without them. But I try to do the work anyway. What I have noticed just in the last couple of days is that I haven't been doing any kid work. And I believe that I have a kid that thought that he would be happy when I lived the life that I'm living now. Actually, I'm living the life that beyond my imagination then. I just don't know how it could be better. And yet I just can't. I struggle with wanting things to make me happy, and I think that that's the kid wanting the material things. He thought he'd be happy, and now he's not. So I don't know what to do about that except to begin writing again to the kid. And he seems to be the only one that comes around anymore. I did the kid work. I was in those classes a couple of times. And so I've done a lot of work in that area, but I sort of let it go. So if you have anything that you can suggest about that, I'm certainly open to hearing it.
I suggest you never stop writing to your kids for any excuse at all until they're fully integrated.
Yeah, and I knew that, didn't I?
Yes. Sure, why would you stop?
I don't know, just...
The purpose of this work is not to arrive at a working relationship with our kids. The purpose of this work is to get rid of all the false beliefs which are the kid and replace them with spiritual truth and transcend the human experience. And we're going to talk about that a bit in the second half. But the purpose of this work is to be kid-free.
Yeah.
And conditioning-free and concept-free and all that stuff free. And...
That's just one area that I haven't been able... Well, I haven't done the work, so it's still
that's
there.
Why. Kids are insatiable.
Yeah, they are.
You see them, I see them in Manhattan Beach. People with $2 million houses need the $5 million house, and then they get the $5 million house and see the $10 million house, you know, and that's kid. That's all kid.
Yeah. Well, I feel fortunate classes and that I know this, so I'm not out to get more stuff.
Yeah.
Because I know that doesn't do it. So I guess I'm beyond the people in Manhattan Beach anyway.
The house hungry ones for sure. Yeah, that's good. That's good. But if you continue doing the work, you know, the fact is that it would never come up.
Right.
The kids can be completely put away. They can be totally integrated. You can get to where you don't have anybody talking to you about we need to get this or that.
Mm-hmm.
What did you have, Chris?
It's actually kind of along the same lines. Like, how do I know when my kid is acting out, or you know, being insatiable, or something actually is coming from the I Christ in me? Meaning, it's something that is just expressing itself, and it's not. For example, the $2 million house. How do I know that the $2 million house is enough and not the $5 million house?
Well, you can check the motive or you can check the voice. It's very clear. You can do enough work that it becomes very clear who's speaking. And if it's a kid, then you work with the kid, and if it's a parent, then you get rid of the parent, and if it's the still small voice within you, you listen to it. But they're very different voices.
And what I find is when I presented throughout the day with world problems, you know, whether they're in my personal or professional life, my kids believe them, and so therefore I believe them until
No. Your kid believes them.
my kid believes them.
Period.
Period. Okay.
No, therefore, I never believe that stuff. I never believe that stuff. The self of me, doesn't believe that stuff.
Well, that's the thing, is
Just a kid.
I oscillate between the two. So if I have enough spiritual adult gear, then the I doesn't believe that.
Right.
But that doesn't happen all the time.
Right.
So I'm just trying to get in the now so I can stay in my I Christ. And that's very hard to do, especially when these things are coming at me so quickly.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's why we do all the kid work. That's why kid work happened to begin with, is because the kids will drag you out of transcendental consciousness in a hot second. You know, that's why we did so much kid work, and that's why people have been doing scripting kid work for 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 years, trying to, you know, every time reducing the amount to which, the extent to which that happens. But certainly that happens. And that's the work.
Well, just keep showing up.
Yep, it's hard work. I mean, there's a lot of, specifically the kid work needs to be done. And even once the kid work is done, then there's all the conditioning that's just been building up for millennia. These beliefs that we brought in with us, you know, that are not necessarily kid, they're not kid in that they're not reducing us to emotion and such like, but, you know, I mean, we don't get emotional about the fact that there's a flu epidemic going around, but nonetheless, unless we've done some work, we believe the flu has power. And so there's all that conditioning that has to be dealt with as well. Once we get rid of the kids and stop having emotional reactions to stuff, we still have millennia of conditioning and such like that's down there, what we call old tapes, and you know, the stuff that keeps playing, you know, over the, you know, and it's just conditioned beliefs. You don't believe it, and there's really nobody in you that believes it, but there's 6 billion of them out there that believe it, and they're radiating at you, and it's your habit to believe it. Your life has been run that way for lifetimes, and so it's there. That's the discipline, and that's why we start with here and now, because the answer is to get here now. And then you're not in that, you know. kid is rising up, get here now, and you're no longer a kid. That's why we started there, brought those up first. That's the first work, and that's, of course, that's the whole work. Once you can be here now at will and stay there, then you don't have any other work to do. It's hard. And the longer you practice, the longer you'll be able to stay in transcendental consciousness, and less frequently you'll get pulled out, and then the quicker you'll get back in on it. Just slowly erodes. Trites. What's the word for attrition? Attritionates.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Who else?
Greg?
Please, Greg.
Just on the lines of kind of what Adele was talking about, the doctor issue. My awareness or consciousness has changed a lot about the concept of doctor. I mean, I think if you are so drawn to see a doctor, if you can lift your consciousness high enough to know that doctors eye Christ, doctors are practitioners. I've just in my course of work, I've driven a few doctors that have had a higher consciousness. And they share this with me.
Speak up, please.
I've introduced, the concept of Joel to a doctor in particular, and he was just so excited to hear about Joel because in his job, he traveled the world healing people in very remote, isolated places in the world. So I think that we can attract a doctor who's going to be of a higher consciousness, who's going to be open to a healing principle that's not so conditioned towards the medical practice of, let me find what's wrong with you, and so much of the physical conditioning. And also, I know that there are doctors that have been practicing for a long period of time have experienced miracles, unexplained events where someone has been healed or cured by something other than a scientific or medical treatment. So, I just think that, as practitioners, if you can bring your consciousness to a higher level and you're so drawn to visit a doctor, then a like consciousness will present itself for you.
Certainly can.
Yeah.
Certainly can. Yeah.
Joe Michael. I'm very grateful that for this class, for the consciousness. I often get into the here and now. It's very difficult, almost impossible to stay there. And with the lifting from this class, I'm reminded, or I remember, I think I can almost use the word more, to remember, to get the hell back there.
Yeah.
Because more and more I get, this is a dream. And as wonderful as it can get, it's still a dream. And unless I'm here and now, I'm lost in the nonsense. So, thanks.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. Unless I'm here now, I'm lost in the nonsense. That's the truth.
This is Adele. I was in the Bay Area last weekend, and I forgot that up there it's not like a grid, and the streets are like triangles. And I went out from where I was at for a cup of coffee, and I got really disoriented. And I've been really playing with this stuff lately in particular, and realized that I don't have a real sense of time and space. I never have. I can just kind of get lost where I'll just go, and I don't have a sense of, I miss doorways and stuff like that. Well, I got very disoriented downtown, and that never was a problem. I've always been disoriented like that, but it wasn't a problem until I started getting upset about it. And then what happens, what I watch is panic sets in. And so I'm just breathing into it, thinking I can't be lost. I'm here. I'm always here. I can't be lost. And as I did that, just breathing, and I sat down in a park, and then I began to remember things like I had an iPhone. You have to know where you begin. I forgot to look where I started, which made it a little more difficult, but that just even breathing and knowing that I can never not be here, and that it's impossible to be lost. I can only feel lost. And I found my way back rather quickly after that. But I had been walking for about an hour in circles. So it was a great practice.
Cool. Yeah, I like that.
Just to be here. I can't be lost. It's impossible.
Hi, Bridget.
Hi, Bridget.
Hello?
Yeah, hi. Go ahead.
Okay. I practiced here and now in a way about staying within my consciousness, as if it was like a fishbowl, a bubble, and then just not ever being within it in the now. So whatever was coming up, then it was immediately applied as, this is within my consciousness, so this is where the work is, first off. Because it's always been my, that aspect of myself that jumps out and then starts to analyze. And so taking that out immediately by just staying within my own consciousness, I knew then that that's where the change had to be. Mm-hmm. And so that, and coinciding with the staying within the car and having the what was appearing as, I was able to perceive it then as consciousness showing the I of my being where I was, and what it gave me was a sense of taking back dominion of the mind. I felt as if though that's the place that I could operate and be with others. And then when I was high with this, I experienced harmony with others. And then as soon as I fell from doing the practice, I came crashing down, and I'm in the moment, I'm in the process of pulling back, bringing back the, trying to lift my wrist out of the muck, which I have a lot of over, as I see it clearly as my emotional nature of the kid aspect, and recognizing that it's not outside of me, and that's part of the taking 100% responsibility that I feel that kid aspect that I'm still working with. So that's how I practice this week. Thanks.
Cool, good. Yeah, that starting place place is just so exactly right. You know, it's tautological that it's within my consciousness, you know. I mean, if everything that I see and that happened to me wasn't within my consciousness, I wouldn't be conscious of it. So it's a given that it's all in my consciousness and just in my consciousness, you know. There's no alternative. So, and that's the place to start, and that's the point that Herb leans on a lot. He's always talking about that, you know. And so if it's in my consciousness, then that's where it needs to be dealt with. So I like that. Thank you. Yes, Beth?
I don't think I have a feeling of here and now, but I oftentimes get a feeling of peace.
Oh, we can't hear you.
Okay, I'll start over. I don't think I have a feeling of here and now, but I oftentimes get a feeling of peace and quiet and being at rest.
Mm-hmm.
But it's certainly, and it doesn't last very long, but it's certainly not what I understand perhaps a feeling of here and now would be.
When you're at peace, is there thinking going on?
No.
Then you're here and now. If you're not thinking, you're here. If you're thinking, you're not here. Do it for now. Yeah, that peace. Yeah, if you're not thinking, there's no you. If I'm not affirming I or Lee, I'm not. There is no such thing. You know, I have to think about me to be there. Otherwise, there's just this vast open space that I can't even say that I'm in. There's just this vast open space when I'm quiet, when my mind is truly silent. So yeah, that is what we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. The peace of God which passeth all understanding. That peace. Preached at my preacher, I guess he's a priest of the Episcopal Church at my church when I was a kid. He used to, his final benediction was always, may the peace of God which passeth all understanding descend upon you and remain with you always. And you know, I had to wait 40 years to discover what a wonderful benediction the man was giving us. You know, what a kind thing to say. I think I want to go ahead and get started on matter because there's a bunch of notes here. Herb and Joel talk a lot about matter or about not matter, and I think I want to get started on that so that we can talk about things that come up. The obstacle is matter. Belief in matter, belief that matter is real, which translates as the belief that there's something out there.
So we think something's the matter.
I'm sorry?
So we think something's the matter.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep, something's the matter is the problem. And the funny thing is that well, first of all, mystics have known for 5 millennia that there's no such thing as matter, and they've been telling us that. And yeah, ever since the Vedas and the Upanishads were written, they've been telling us that there is no such thing as matter, that it's all images and forms and sensations within mind. And the fun thing is that science now, finally, after 5,000 years, science is agreeing with them that there is no matter. We used to, I mean, even before quantum theory, it was very clear that in reality everything is mostly space. You know, you go into something and you discover cells, and you go down into the cells with a bigger microscope and you find molecules, and you go down into the molecules with a better microscope and you find atoms, and you go into that finer and you find, you know, little nuclei, and you find electrons. And the fact is that the distance between these atoms is huge compared to the size of the atom, and the distance between the electrons and the nucleus is huge compared to the size of the nucleus. So there's as much space inside an atom as there is inside our solar system. If you look at the amount of matter there is in the sun and the 9 planets, and then you look at the volume of space, you know, there's no matter in there at all, so to speak. And atoms are the same way. So the deeper we look, the more we see that there's nothing there. And then along comes quantum theory, and now the scientists themselves, I had a great fun reading that for about a year. I read versions of quantum theory that I could understand, and what they've really come to, there are all sorts of paradoxes that come up in quantum theory. First of all, they don't know what anything is, and they certainly can't tell you where anything is, and they certainly can't tell you that these little particles are even particles, because sometimes they're waves and sometimes they're particles. And even if you accept that they're waves or particles, you can't talk about where they are. There's only a probability that it might be somewhere. And it's not that we don't know where it is, it's that it's not in any of those places. It's just a probability that it will be somewhere, and it gets wishier and wishier and wishier. And then there's all sorts of paradoxes that come up, and eventually you discover, or I discovered, that the only thing that makes quantum theory hold together and make sense is if you assume that all there is the consciousness, and that matter is a phenomenon that is produced by consciousness within consciousness. If you don't take that position, all sorts of paradoxes happen that they are blissfully unaware, unable to resolve right now. So even modern science is forcing us. I mean, the math, the high science and math, is forcing our scientists to the conclusion that all there is consciousness, and that matter is really what they would call an epiphenomenon of consciousness, which is to say it's a phenomenon that is caused by consciousness. And the interesting thing is that to avoid the paradoxes, since the consciousness is what determines which things manifest where, there can only be one consciousness or there would be conflicts. So there's a really good case scientifically now that there is no such thing as matter.
Doesn't that come up quite a bit in string theory?
Yeah.
Which they talk about the different terrains and dimensions.
Yeah, it's on the way down to string theory that all this stuff comes up, yeah. Strings living in 6 dimensions that we can't see within the 9 within the 3 that we do see. There's 6 or 7 more, and maybe 1 more when you count time. In any event, matter, yeah. Science is in accord with the mystics finally that matter is a phenomenon that occurs within consciousness and is produced by consciousness. Otherwise, they can't get consistent. But they will not accept that. They are just dancing so hard trying to avoid that conclusion and writing that off to their lack of understanding. I've got a bunch of quotes or paraphrases from Joel and from Herb that I could have been bombarded with all week. Joel wrote a book called, or I guess Lorraine put together a book from some letters Joel wrote her called Living Between Two Worlds. And Herb Fitch's, the 86 and 87 CDs and tapes in there are from a series that he did called Living Between Two Worlds, which was based on Joel's book. And he was reading the other morning, he read this statement out of Joel. Joel says, a human being is living in a purely material sense of world, but is not living in a material world because there is none. I think that just, I mean, that's the nuts and bolts of it. A human being is living in a purely material sense of world, but is not living in a material world because there is none. And Herb's whole discussion is that, you know, and this is the underlying premise of the infinite way, that there are really 2 worlds. Jesus talked about my kingdom and this world. There are really 2 worlds. One is the creation of what is, or what is. You can say that the creation of what is what is, but one is what is, but we can call it what is creation, and the other is man's creation. And Joel or Herb says, man's creation is his 5-sense recreation of what is his creation. The senses are the funny thing. Our 5 senses can only, they experience material stuff. That's what they're designed to do. I mean, the specific thing that our five senses do is react to what we consider to be matter and material stuff. And the thing we forget is that the five senses are themselves matter. That the five senses are the sensory organs of the body that itself is part of the dream. Okay, so the five senses, it's not that we're experiencing the dream through our five senses. The five senses themselves are part of the dream. The whole experience is part of the dream. So what we're doing mentally is, because our level of consciousness is limited at the moment, we're experiencing things at the level of these five senses that we have created for ourselves to represent our level of consciousness at the moment. He says the substance of what is creation is divine thought, and that's as good a phrase as any, and the substance of man's creation is human thought. And then he says everything you're looking at is your thought about what is this thought. You're looking at what is this invisible thought, but what you think you're seeing is your thought. So what you're seeing is your concept of the invisible divine reality. I don't like the word divine, but I don't know any word that expresses that. I don't like, I'm back to my pointing at the moon vocabulary. I don't want to use loaded words, but in any event, we're seeing our concept of what is rather than what is, and our concept of what is determined pretty much by our level of consciousness. If you, David Hawkins wrote, his first book was called Power versus Force, and in that he describes a chain of levels of consciousness from essentially 0 to 1,000, where 1,000 is the level of consciousness of a Buddha or a Jesus. And he has a bunch of levels on this scale. Below 200, it's essentially an animalistic level of consciousness, although lots of people have it. And love begins to be introduced at 200 or 300, and I guess love doesn't really come until 500, does it? And he's got various levels of consciousness, and he's drawn out this scale of progressive levels of consciousness. And the one thing that I really got from looking at this in the book is the realization that at whatever level of consciousness you're at, that's the way you see things. That's what it means to be at that level of consciousness. That's the way you see things, and that's your experience. And because there are so many other people that are at that level of consciousness too, you think that's the way things are. So at whatever level of consciousness we're at, that level of consciousness determines what we see and what we experience. And of course we do see and experience that, and think that that's the way things are. And you experience that all the time. You talk to people that are not as, haven't been in this kind of work for as long as you, and it's very clear that they see things quite differently than you, and that the way they see it is considerably less comfortable or happy as the way you see it. And then you see people that are, like I've spent time with Robert, and I see what Robert's like, and it's very clear that his experience is totally different than mine, and it is much more comfortable than mine. I remember reading Shinryu Suzuki. I'm reading the book and I'm not understanding a word he says, but I keep reading it because it's very clear to me that although I don't understand the word he's saying, his way is working better than mine. Okay? And that's what happens as we go up this scale. But the point is that at whatever level of consciousness we're at, that's the way we see things. That's what we believe. That's the way we see things, and that's our experience.
Can I ask you a question
Sure.
about that?
Sure.
This is something that's come up in a lot of different ways, but in doing this work and realizing that there is, that the material and what is happening sensory is not the reality. Going from knowing that, and then what I found is that teetering over to pretending that I'm not having the experience. Of course, there's a belief that this shouldn't be the experience, of course. And I already hear who thinks it shouldn't be. I already hear that. But there's, I've just experienced that a lot.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the problem is that we start hearing about levels of consciousness and we start wanting to be at a higher level of consciousness. And we start judging ourselves if we aren't and acting as if we were and thinking we should be, and all these thoughts come in and it causes us pain, which is a very clear evidence that we're not at that level of consciousness, that we're at a level of consciousness where we cause ourselves pain by thinking we should be at a higher level of consciousness, okay? Yeah, the peaceful path is total acceptance of where you are, with no judgment. But of course that's a very high level of consciousness, isn't it? To totally accept where you are and have no judgment about it, but be able to see where it's at. That's already a very high.
What if it's a very low acceptance? It's a complete acceptance of a very low consciousness.
People that have very low consciousness don't completely accept it. A very low consciousness is not an accepting consciousness. They may ask that way, but what they're doing is out there trying to get everything they can get. It takes a very high level of consciousness to be completely accepting. Unconditional acceptance. The lower the level of consciousness, the more they think they're doing it to us, and I should have this, and I'm deserving this, and I'm entitled, and all that stuff comes in.
That sort of, in the 12-step vernacular, when you're talking about step one, surrender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's why step one is step one. Unless you have accepted where you are, you can't move. You have to accept powerlessness. That's why step one is step one. The idea is that until you see clearly where you are and accept it, you can't move. Because I can't move from where I'm not. I have to start where I am.
Man, I just heard something. And that is that, I don't have to tell myself it's reality, to be okay with it. That's what I'm experiencing right now. This is the experience right now.
Yeah.
I just realized that I confused those.
It has nothing to do with reality. Now, all of this goes on in our dreams at night. I mean, none of us knows for sure that we're not going to wake up 10 minutes from now and discover ourselves in our bed dreaming about we've been having a class over at Leelaa. I mean, none of us knows we aren't. We can have this experience in dreams. We can pat chairs and feel the resistance, I mean, none of us can prove that this isn't a dream. And Robert used to say that because he was often having visions, and he was often having dreams, and he was often doing this, whatever we call this, and he often was confused as to which he was having, whether he was having a dream or a vision or being in this, because there was no difference to him, okay? They all had equal levels of reality and equal levels of significance and equal levels of weight, and so he was often confused as to which one he was in, essentially because it was irrelevant. None of it had any reality to him. So Herb says something like, we're looking at a world that seems to be external, but it's all composed of the thoughts of human beings. And because we all see the same thing, we think it's external. But we are attuned to one cosmic mind, and we're seeing what the cosmic mind places in our consciousness, unless we're able to transcend human thought. And don't start asking what cosmic mind is. I don't know how cosmic mind is different from world mind, but essentially it's what he's saying is that the human beliefs are that there's only one consciousness and that there's only one mind, and that we're looking in the one mind that we're attuned to, and we're seeing what human thought sees. And I think that David Hawkins would say that actually the tuning is much finer than that. There are different levels of cosmic mind, and what we're doing is we're seeing all the people that are, if we're a 360, we're seeing what all the 360 people are seeing, and if we're a 420, we're seeing what all the 420 people are seeing. There are different levels, and these levels, the level that you're at, you tend to, people get locked into it because they immediately surround themselves with other people who are at that level who reaffirm that that's what's going on. But in any event, what we're seeing is what we all believe. We're not just seeing I'm not personally responsible for everything I see. Human consciousness is responsible for everything I see, or in a bit more detail, that part of human consciousness which I pick up because of where I'm at. It determines what I see. He says the five senses recycle spirit into matter, divine life into the appearance of human life, eternal life into lifespans, immortal life into perishable life, spiritual bodies into physical bodies, the spiritual universe into the material universe, perfection into good and evil, an infinite God into an abstract concept without power to govern the recycled universe. Okay? So that's what we're doing, because those are our concepts and our beliefs. We believe in good and evil, so we see it. We believe in lifespans, so we get born and die, etc., etc. People on the phone, don't hesitate to jump in and ask questions or comments or such like.
This is Bridget again. I was studying the living between two worlds, and I was listening to 4B, and I wrote this where he states, which I think is right in line what you're speaking about tonight, and that's recreated images of an imitation universe, all located in the world mind and the five corporeal senses, which are created by world mind, not of God. And I thought, it was that, what just rang home was when the word used imitation. Uh-huh. So I was like, oh, I got it, oh, that's just an imitation, that's our concept.
Yep, that's it.
And it's a false one, all through and through. And we use those five senses as our means to just perpetuate.
That's right. That's the nature of it. And no matter how high you get wearing a body, if you get to where you don't see anything except light beings and you're still wearing a body, it will still just be your concept of it. It won't be the reality. It'll still just be your concept. But as our consciousness rises, our concepts get more refined and rise, and our experience gets more comfortable. Yeah, this information that I'm reading is from mostly from Herb's tapes 2 and 3. For anybody that's in the San Diego 88, 86, 2 and 3. Good tapes, and I'm going to be going into more of them. We'll probably do another week on matter, because I don't think 1 week's going to be enough, and we'll probably want to do a couple more tapes for that. All heaven is recycled into time by the cosmic mind and the five senses of man. And nothing can stop the masquerade except one determined action, unwavering commitment to step out of the physical sense of form. Okay, now that's the crux of it. The only thing that breaks this is unwavering commitment, unwavering determination to step out of the physical sense of form, to stop believing. And see, the biggest problem with matter is that we believe we're living in a material body. I mean, we are falsely identified with this material body, and whenever we're talking about my kid being in ascendancy, or my kid being in charge, or I'm in kid, what we're talking about is we're believing we're in this material body. You know, we're suddenly limited to this material body, and we think we're this brain thing inside this material body, looking out through these eyes and listening through these ears and seeing what's out there and what's real. And the game is to get out of the idea that we're in that material body, and when you're here now, you're out of it. Pay attention, continue, don't stop doing the here and now thing, and notice when you're here and now, notice that you're not in the physical body. You may recall when we did the awareness exercise, Barbara would say, okay, now be aware of the eye that you really are. And she'd say, can you do it? And they'd say, yeah. And she says, how do you know? And the way you know that you're in your eye is that you're not in your body. It's very clear that you're not in your body when you're having that awareness. So the awareness exercise can, once again, I mean, that's its purpose, is to bring you into the transcendental consciousness, which is to say out of the consciousness of being in a physical body. So that's the important, I mean, if you want to pick one, I mean, I don't really need for us to progress to where we don't believe the chair is real. I need for us to progress to the point where we don't believe that my body is real and that I live in it and that I am it. That's the big step. And the one determined action to stop the masquerade, unwavering commitment to step out of the physical sense of form, trying over and over and over and over and over and over every time you remember to do it, you know. And come join me at the morning meeting and sit there with me for an hour practicing. It's a great place to practice. I just love going there because there's nothing worth saying, nothing worth hearing being said there, so I don't get tempted to listen. So I watch the zoo and remind myself of the truth, you know, and it's a place where I can get a few minutes of unwavering practice into an hour, which is a higher percentage of unwavering practice during an hour sitting there with nothing else to do. You know, I'm there and I'm alert. It's a good practice. Okay. The material body, if you're in your material body, you're separate from what is. This is the thing we've talked about before. If you're in space, if you're in time, you're apart from what is. If you're in your material body, you're separate from what is. And you're not experiencing what is this creation. You're experiencing, if I'm completely buying my physical body and that I'm in it, then I'm completely buying the human material world. And I believe in the material world. And if I'm not in my body, then I'm in touch with the spiritual world, and my discernment faculty starts seeing things more as they are.
Like, what is it then to be integrated with one's body? To be integrated, so not so cut off from that. And how does that fit in with knowing that you're not your body?
It doesn't. Two totally different levels of work. If you can become aware that you're not your body, then there's no reason to integrate your body since it's not you anyway. The distinction is that people who totally, there's stages that we seem to go through. People who are totally in their heads all the time, they're not in mind, they're in their intellects, okay? And that means that they're asleep. They're not even aware of what is in the relative world. And so that usually people say that you need to become aware of that first, but there's no reason why you couldn't bypass that. There's no reason to integrate your body with your head that I can think of. There are a lot of goals in the material world that we no longer need to pursue. It doesn't matter if my material body has rock hard abs or a washboard stomach. or 20/20 vision, or any of that stuff. If it's not me, if it's not my body, if I'm not in it, although some of that stuff would certainly perhaps help that object perform certain functions, but Ramana Maharshi's greatest teaching was probably while he was on the couch permanently with cancer. I mean, that was probably his greatest period of teaching, so not having a physical body that allowed him to get around and teach didn't affect him at all. And his greatest teaching was showing people that body wasn't him, that cancer-ridden body wasn't him. And reminded them that, quit believing that's me. Haven't you heard anything I've said for the last 20 years? That's not me, So there's no advantage to being a physical specimen or anything at all. That's all those games are in the material world. Conscious union with what is impossible within form. If you're in your body, you're not in conscious union with what is, if you believe you're in your body. The flip side is, if you're in conscious union with what is, you are outside form, outside body, and you're the living self. I'm going to do the homework now, and then we can talk for as long as you want, but then people that want to get off at 8:30 or whatever can do so. Herb says on one of those tapes, he said, make the theme of your first morning meditation, I am spirit, I do not live in a human body. Okay? So the first meditation is, I am spirit, I do not live in a human body. He says, establish it and extend it to include spirit as the one infinite self. There is no other self, therefore there are no human bodies anywhere. Hold this meditation until you realize that you do not live in a human body, that nobody lives in a human body. Okay? So, it turns out that's very compatible with our 5:30 to 6 work, because you recall that when we start the second meditation, when he's doing the one on Parkinson's disease, he talks about how we have to first of all realize ourselves, okay? Realize who we are. If we're going to see our friend as a spiritual being, we first of all have to be a spiritual being, he says, because if we're living in the 5 sense body, we're going to see a 5 sense body. Okay, that's the problem. If I think I'm a 5 sense body, then I'm believing my 5 senses and I'm seeing 5 sense bodies. If I am aware of who I am, then I am aware that that's who you are. Okay, so part of the healing meditation, or at least the preparation for it, is to do exactly what he just said. The first stage of your healing meditation can be, I am spirit, I do not live in a human body. I live in the one infinite self. There is no other self, and there are no human bodies anywhere. That's a fine opening meditation for the healing work, so feel free to plug that in before the 5:30 work in the morning. So let's practice that this week. Let's start working on that. And you can also, of course, feel free to work on reminding yourself that this is a dream, or reminding yourself that, however you want to say that this isn't real, or reminding yourself that this is all taking place in my consciousness, or reminding myself that this is all images in mind. Movies have us confused. We think images are visual, and now we're starting to think they're visual and audio, but we don't think that images are tactile, but these images in mind happen to be audio and video and olfactory and tactile and have taste, so it's a 5 sense. These images, these forms in mind, 5 sense stuff rather than just the sight and sound that we're used to in movies, but it's just a hologram. So now, anybody got anything the matter with them? Thanks, folks. What's the matter with that? Doesn't matter.
Nothing matters.
Nothing matters.
I think it's interesting what you said about the scientists, because, you know, I've just exposed to information about, you know, some of the scientists trying to discover gravitron, and also this collider experiment that these scientists are doing. You know, they're trying to discover like God space, or, you know, an invisible dimension where most, you know, there is no matter.
Yep.
So it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, they're getting brought to their knees, so to speak. It's fun. Boy, they fight hard. I mean, I've read several books, and these guys, you know, just will not let go of the idea that there is an external reality, and they're just, I mean, they really believe that they're finding it very confusing and unsurprising and reality, but with the exception of one or two authors, it never occurs to them that they're not talking about an external reality to themselves. You know, that is their level of consciousness. That is their world, and they're writing these PhD papers back and forth affirming that level of consciousness. It never occurs to them that it's not really external and that it can't be described. They're finding it harder and harder.
Lee,
Yes.
it's Jessica.
Hi, Jessica.
Hi. When you when you were speaking throughout this evening, and then you start, here's where I am, you know, what it all comes down to for me is when I'm aware that my mind gets activated, then something else is like, just shut up. I mean, for me, just like, it can go like a bat out of hell, but when I catch it, just be quiet, just to go back to the quiet.
Yeah.
Now, but my mind did get activated, and it's something that churns inside of me, and it has to do with faith, because, and I've been aware in the last couple of weeks how, you know, when I talked to you last week and you said, well, there's something activated here about the kid, and I couldn't relate to that right away, but over the last couple of weeks, it's like, yeah, it's obvious, there's this thing about perfectionism happening, but there's also this longing in me there's always this longing in me to just completely surrender and have faith. So when you were talking earlier about going to a doctor, and you don't get any, I forget what you said, something like kudos for not going to a doctor. But then when I'm listening to Herb's tapes, and he's saying it's in the silence that the healing takes place, I believe that. I've witnessed that. I've experienced that. But then, so when here I am hearing, and it's even coming from Joel because I saw that on your site earlier this week about when he went to a doctor because the spiritual work wasn't working, and then just keep pursuing the truth, or keep pursuing the silence. It's like my mind rips me back and forth with it. It's like, okay, I mean, you know, I've been struggling with herniating my disc and having pain, and my life right now doesn't lend itself to sitting down and meditating all the time. Because I've been thrust into having, my life being pulled out from underneath me and having to move and do all kinds of things. So, but when there's something in me that got a little bit disturbed with the thing about going to the doctor and then hearing that but it's in the silence that the healing takes place, and that's.
But make a distinction here now. Let's talk about healing versus alleviating the symptoms. In the physical world, I may well have symptoms, and if I go to a doctor may very well alleviate the symptoms, okay? But that's not a healing.
Right.
That's just to get rid of the symptoms. He may put out the flu, or he may give you an antibiotic. He may solve the symptoms. He may cure you, so to speak, of flu, let's say. But that's not a healing, because that belief that allowed you to catch the flu is still part of your makeup. All right?
Mm-hmm.
But what Joel says is, if you've got the symptoms, there's nothing wrong with going to somebody and getting the symptoms taken care of. But what I'm making a distinction now between symptoms and problems. And I'm saying don't confuse that with a healing. And maybe after you catch flu 100 times, you'll decide that, well, I don't want to spend the rest of my life catching flu 7 times a year, so I'm I'm tired of this. I'm tired of antibiotics because of the other effect it's having on my body and the side effects and all that sort of stuff, and I've had enough of this nonsense, and I'm going to just sit here and deal with this particular problem spiritually. And so you may sit down and meditate, call for help, and get a healing on the flu, okay? And then you probably won't get flu again, but you might get AIDS. Or herniated disc, or get cancer, if you worked on flu. So now you have to address all the problems until you eventually come to this awareness, until you attain the consciousness that you don't get sick. And even then, Joel and Herb both said, as I commented earlier, that you still may get 10 or 15 or 20% of the things that the rest of people get 100% of, but when you do, they'll be less severe and shorter duration. But be realistic, differentiate between doctors heal symptoms, and that's an important thing, to get the symptoms healed so we can get back to work. And there's no reason to go around, in pain. If I broke my arm and the bone was coming through the skin, I'd go get it set. Immediately. It would never occur to me not to, because the arm is already broken. I've already lost the battle. I can't heal myself. It's a little late to call, for healing. But hopefully I would have developed a consciousness where that's very unlikely to happen to me. Does that give you any clarity?
Yeah.
Work where you are. Do what you can do. And don't beat yourself up.
Yeah, that in the last 2 weeks I've been aware of that thing is, that I thought that was gone, but it's, obviously subterranean reared its head again, so.
Okay. So, deal with it again.
Pardon me?
So deal with it again.
I just watch it and don't pay attention to it.
That's right. Fine.
So,
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Glad you're with us.
I'm glad I'm with you too. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Anybody else? All right, let's get quiet for 5 minutes. Okay, thank you all. Love you all. See you next week, I hope. Thanks for coming. Night, everybody.
Night.
Bye.